Captain Jiwan sat in her command chair on the bridge of the diplomatic vessel Starlight Dawn. Her eyes were fixed on the main viewing screen. A massive human warship was passing by their position. It was close enough to see with the naked eye through the reinforced windows. The ship was enormous, at least 3 times the size of her own vessel. Its hull was a dark gray color with strange markings that seemed to shimmer and move when she looked at them too long. Her first officer, Minho, stood beside her station. He was young for his rank, only 30 cycles old, but he was smart and eager to learn. He watched the human ship with obvious curiosity. His fingers moved across his control panel, bringing up various sensor displays. The passive sensors showed basic information about the ship: size, mass, energy output. Nothing unusual or concerning. Minho turned to face Captain Jiwan. His expression was thoughtful. He had an idea and wanted to share it with his captain. The young officer cleared his throat to get her attention. Jiwan looked at him and nodded, giving him permission to speak. Minho spoke carefully. He suggested they should run a deep scan of the human warship. It was a rare opportunity, he explained. Human vessels did not often pass this close to their diplomatic ships. The data they could gather would be valuable. Their science division would appreciate having detailed information about human military technology. It would help the Alliance understand their human partners better. Before Captain Jiwan could respond, a sharp voice cut through the bridge. It was Hyejin, the elder advisor. She was the oldest member of the crew, over 200 cycles old. Her species aged slowly, and with age came wisdom. Hyejin had served on diplomatic missions for more than a century. She had seen things that most crew members could only imagine. Hyejin moved from her position at the back of the bridge. Her steps were quick despite her age. The scales on her face had darkened, which among her people was a sign of serious concern or fear. She reached Minho's station and placed a hand firmly on his shoulder. Her grip was strong enough to make the young officer freeze. She spoke with absolute authority. No scanning, not even passive deep scans, absolutely nothing beyond basic visual observation. Her voice was stern, leaving no room for argument. Minho looked confused. He did not understand why such a simple scan would be forbidden. After all, humans were their allies. There should be no secrets between allied forces. Captain Jiwan studied the old advisor carefully. She had learned to trust Hyejin's instincts over the years they had served together. The elder never made such strong demands without good reason. Jiwan gestured for Hyejin to explain. The whole bridge crew was listening now. Their work had stopped as everyone waited to hear what the advisor had to say. Hyejin took a deep breath. She began to tell them a story. It happened 3 cycles ago, she said. The Varathi Empire had encountered a human patrol fleet near the border systems. The Varathi were known across the galaxy as masters of technology. Their scanning systems were the most advanced in known space. They could detect a single atom from 1,000 kilometers away. Their scientists were proud of their abilities. The Varathi commander had ordered a full deep scan of the human vessels. It was standard procedure for them. They scanned everything they encountered. Knowledge was power, and the Varathi wanted all the knowledge they could gather. The scan had begun without any problems. The systems worked perfectly. Data started flowing into their computers. Then the readings started coming back. Hyejin's voice became quieter as she continued the story. The data made no sense. The Varathi sensors detected things that should not exist. Energy readings that contradicted the basic laws of physics. Matter that was both solid and not solid at the same time. Spaces inside the human ships that were larger than the ships themselves. The Varathi Science Council received the data. At first they thought their equipment was broken. They ran diagnostics. Everything checked out. The scanners were working perfectly. The data was accurate. But it was impossible. It broke every rule of science they knew. Their best scientists studied the readings for weeks, then months. They could not explain what they were seeing. Hyejin paused. Her scales had turned even darker. She looked each crew member in the eye as she continued. 2 of the Varathi scientists went mad, she said. They could not accept what the data showed them. Their minds could not process the contradictions. The things they saw in those scans challenged everything they believed about reality. One scientist refused to eat or sleep. He just stared at the data, trying to make sense of it. The other started speaking in mathematical equations that no one could understand. The Varathi government had to take action. They offered the scientists a choice. They could undergo a memory erasure procedure. It was dangerous and not always perfect, but it would remove the memories of what they had seen. Both scientists agreed immediately. They wanted to forget. They needed to forget. The procedure was performed. Both scientists survived, but they were never the same. They could no longer work in advanced science. The trauma was too deep. The Varathi Empire made an official declaration after that incident. They issued a galaxy-wide warning. Never scan human warships. Never try to analyze their technology too deeply. Accept that it works without trying to understand how. The declaration was added to the Galactic Council records. It became official policy for all member species. Minho stood very still. His face had gone pale. He looked at his control panel and then back at the human ship on the screen. He asked Hyejin a question. His voice was uncertain. What exactly did the Varathi find inside those human ships? What was so terrible that it drove scientists mad? Hyejin shook her head slowly. She did not know all the details. The Varathi had classified most of the information. What little was shared was heavily redacted. But the rumors spoke of impossible things. Creatures that existed in multiple places at once. Engines that ran on paradoxes. Weapons that fired before the trigger was pulled. Technology that should not work but did anyway. Captain Jiwon made her decision. She turned to Minho and gave him a direct order. All scanning systems were to remain offline. Only passive visual observation was permitted. No active sensors, no deep scans, no analysis beyond what their eyes could see. The order was to be logged and followed strictly. Any violation would result in immediate disciplinary action. Minho nodded quickly. He understood now. His hands moved across his panel, shutting down the scanning systems completely. He made sure they were fully offline. There would be no accidental activation. No curious junior officer would be able to turn them on without going through multiple security protocols. The bridge crew watched in silence as the human warship continued on its path. It moved with surprising grace for something so large. The strange markings on its hull continued to shimmer. Now that they knew not to look too closely, those markings seemed even more unsettling. They appeared to move in ways that did not match the ship's actual movement. After several minutes, the human ship was far enough away to be safe. Captain Jiwon allowed herself to relax slightly in her chair. She looked at Hyejin with gratitude. The old advisor had saved them from making a terrible mistake. Hyejin simply nodded. She had done her duty. She had protected her crew from knowledge that could destroy them. The human warship disappeared into the distance. It jumped to faster than light speed and vanished from their sensors entirely. The crew of the Starlight Dawn remained quiet for a long time. They had learned an important lesson that day. Sometimes ignorance was not just bliss. Sometimes it was survival. The humans were their allies, yes. But their technology was something beyond understanding. Something that should not be studied too closely. Something that was better left as a mystery. Junior Technician Daeho was working the night shift in the sensor room. The room was quiet except for the soft hum of equipment. Most of the senior staff had gone to their quarters for rest. Only a skeleton crew remained to monitor the systems. Daeho was alone at his station. He liked the night shift. It gave him time to think and learn without supervisors watching over his shoulder. He was young, fresh out of the academy. This was his first real assignment on a deep space vessel. He wanted to prove himself. He wanted to show that he deserved to be here. So he stayed alert, monitoring every signal that came through his systems. Even during the quiet hours when nothing usually happened, a proximity alarm chimed softly. Daeho checked his display. A ship was approaching their position. He pulled up the identification data. It was a human destroyer. The vessel was moving at standard patrol speed. Nothing unusual or threatening about its approach. It would pass within scanning range in approximately 5 minutes. Daeho remembered his training. Standard procedure was to perform a routine scan of any vessel that came within range. It was basic protocol. The data helped maintain updated records of Allied ship movements. It also served as practice for the scanning operators. He had done this hundreds of times during training simulations. His fingers moved across the controls. He initiated the scanning sequence. The computer asked for confirmation. He entered his authorization code. The scan began automatically. Green lights appeared on his panel. Everything was working normally. The sensors reached out toward the approaching human vessel. What Daeho did not know was that the order to never scan human warships had not reached the night shift crew yet. The directive was still being processed through the chain of command. It would arrive in his message queue in another hour. But right now, in this moment, he had no idea he was making a terrible mistake. The first readings appeared on his screen. Deho frowned. The numbers did not make sense. He checked the calibration. Everything showed green. The sensors were working perfectly. But the data they were sending back was wrong. It had to be wrong. Physics did not work the way these readings suggested. Energy signatures appeared on his display. They showed as both matter and antimatter at the same time. The same particles, in the same location, existing in two opposite states simultaneously. Deho's training told him this was impossible. Matter and antimatter could not occupy the same space. They would annihilate each other instantly. But there it was, clear as day on his sensors. He tried to refine the scan. Maybe he was reading it wrong. Maybe there was interference. The computer processed his request and sent back new data. It was worse. Much worse. The spatial readings now showed dimensions that should not exist. The interior of the human ship was larger than the exterior. Not by a little, by a lot. The space inside bent and folded in ways that broke the basic rules of geometry. Deho's hands started to shake. He tried to stop the scan, but his fingers kept moving on the controls. He needed to see more. He needed to understand. The scientist in him demanded answers. How could any of this be real? How could a ship function with these impossible properties? The biological scanners activated next. This was part of the standard deep scan sequence. The results flooded his screen. There were life forms aboard the human vessel. That was normal. But these readings were not normal. The organisms showed quantum signatures. They existed in multiple states at once. The sensors detected them in different locations simultaneously. The same creature was in the engine room and the bridge and the cargo bay all at the same time. More data appeared. Temporal readings. The sensors detected time moving differently in various parts of the ship. In one section, time moved forward. In another, it moved backward. In a third, it seemed to move in both directions at once. Cause and effect were reversed. Things happened before the events that caused them. Deho's supervisor, Sora, entered the sensor room. She was carrying a cup of hot tea. She had come to check on the junior technician and see if he needed a break. She saw him hunched over his console. His face was illuminated by the glow of the screens. Something about his posture worried her. Sora walked closer. She saw the data on his screens. Her cup slipped from her hands. It shattered on the floor. Hot tea splashed everywhere. She did not notice. Her eyes were fixed on the readings. She recognized what she was seeing. She had attended the briefing about human warships. She knew about the Vorathi incident. Sora lunged for the controls. Her hands flew across the shutdown sequence. She killed the scanners with emergency override codes. The screens went dark. But she was too late. Deho had already seen too much. The damage was done. His mind had been exposed to knowledge it was not meant to process. The young technician sat motionless in his chair. His eyes were still fixed on the now dark screens. His lips moved. He was whispering something. Sora leaned closer to hear. Deho was speaking in numbers, mathematical equations, physics formulas. But they were wrong. They described a reality that could not exist. He talked about particles that were waves and solid objects at the same time, about energy that created itself from nothing, about spaces that contained infinity within finite boundaries. His voice was flat, emotionless, like he was reading from a textbook. But the words he spoke made no sense. They challenged the basic foundations of science. Sora hit the emergency call button. She needed medical help immediately. She grabbed Deho's shoulders and tried to get his attention. He did not respond. He just kept whispering his impossible calculations. His eyes had a distant look, like he was seeing something far beyond the room, something beyond normal space and time. Medical Officer Taeyong arrived within 2 minutes. He had been alerted by the emergency signal. He took one look at Deho and understood the situation. He had been briefed on what to do if someone was exposed to human technology scans. The protocol was clear: immediate sedation, mental quarantine. Psychological evaluation. Taeyong pulled out a medical injector. He pressed it against Deho's neck. The young technician did not even flinch. The sedative entered his bloodstream. Within seconds, his eyes began to close. The whispering slowed and then stopped. His body went limp. Taeyong caught him before he could fall from the chair. Two medical assistants arrived with a stretcher. They carefully moved Daeho onto it. Taeyong gave them instructions. The technician was to be taken to the isolation ward. No visitors. Constant monitoring. He would need extensive therapy. Maybe even memory suppression if the damage was too severe. Sora stood alone in the sensor room after they left. She looked at the controls that Daeho had used. The scanners were offline now, safely shut down, but the data was still in the system. It was stored in the computer's memory banks. She knew she should delete it. But she hesitated. Part of her wanted to look, wanted to understand what Daeho had seen. She shook her head. No. That way led to madness. She had seen what happened to Daeho. She would not make the same mistake. Her fingers moved across the controls. She initiated a secure deletion protocol. The data began to erase, layer by layer, until nothing remained. The computer confirmed deletion. The information was gone, lost forever. Through the window, Sora could see the human destroyer. It continued on its path, steady and calm, completely unaware of the chaos it had caused. The ship's crew probably did not even know they had been scanned. They were just doing their patrol, just going about their normal duties. They had no idea that their mere presence could break minds. Sora filed her report. She documented everything that had happened. The unauthorized scan, Daeho's reaction, the medical emergency, the data deletion. She sent it up the chain of command marked as urgent. This incident needed to be added to the official records. Others needed to know. The warning about human warships needed to reach every crew member. No exceptions. The human destroyer jumped to faster-than-light speed. It vanished from the sensors, the normal safe sensors that only showed basic information. Sora watched it go. She thought about Daeho in the medical bay. She wondered if he would ever recover, if his mind could heal from what it had witnessed. She hoped so, but she was not sure. Some knowledge could not be unlearned. Some things once seen could never be forgotten. Science Director Minji sat in her private office deep within the research station. The walls were lined with shelves containing data crystals and old paper books. She valued knowledge above all else. Her entire life had been dedicated to understanding the universe. But now she faced a mystery that terrified and fascinated her in equal measure. The incident with junior technician Daeho had reached her desk 3 days ago. The report was deeply disturbing. A young, promising scientist reduced to a babbling shell of himself. All because he had scanned a human warship. The official policy was clear. Do not scan. Do not study. Do not try to understand. But Minji could not accept that. Her scientific mind rebelled against willful ignorance. She made a decision. She would form a secret research team. They would study the data that Daeho had collected, but they would do it carefully. With proper safety protocols, with mental health monitoring. They would approach it scientifically. Surely there was a way to understand human technology without losing their minds in the process. Minji selected her team members carefully. She chose people she trusted, people with strong minds and flexible thinking. First was Junho, a data analyst with 15 years of experience. He was known for his ability to find patterns in chaos. If anyone could make sense of impossible data, it was him. Second was Yuna, a theoretical physicist. She specialized in quantum mechanics and probability theory. Her work on parallel universe mathematics had won her several prestigious awards. If anyone could understand technology that broke the rules of physics, Yuna could. Third was Dongyun, a xenobiologist. He had studied alien life forms for 2 decades. He had seen organisms that defied normal biology, creatures that survived in impossible conditions. His experience with the strange and unusual made him valuable for this project. Minji called them to a secure meeting room. The room was shielded against electronic surveillance. No one could overhear what they discussed here. She explained the situation. She showed them heavily edited versions of Daeho's scan data, just enough to give them an idea of what they would be dealing with. Not enough to cause immediate psychological damage. Junho looked at the data samples. His expression was skeptical. He thought it must be sensor errors, equipment malfunction. The readings were too impossible to be real. But Minji assured him the sensors had been working perfectly. Every diagnostic check came back clean. The data was accurate. It just described things that should not exist. Yuna was more intrigued than frightened. She asked questions, lots of questions, about the energy readings, about the spatial measurements, about the temporal anomalies. Her mind was already working on theories, on possible explanations. She wanted full access to the complete data set. Minji warned her to be careful. They would release the data slowly, in small pieces. They would monitor each team member's mental state after every session. If anyone showed signs of distress, they would stop immediately. This was not worth losing more minds over. Safety came first. Dongyan was quiet. He studied the biological readings with intense focus. He had never seen anything like it. The quantum signatures of the organisms aboard the human ship were unprecedented. They suggested life forms that existed in superposition, that could be in multiple places simultaneously. He wondered what kind of creature could naturally have such properties. The team worked for 3 weeks. They met every day in the secure room. They analyzed the data piece by piece, building theories, testing ideas, discarding explanations that did not fit. It was slow, careful work. But gradually a picture began to emerge. Junho discovered patterns in the energy readings. The humans had not just built engines. They had weaponized fundamental forces of nature. They had devices that could manipulate probability itself, make unlikely events become certain, make certain events become impossible. It was technology that treated reality like a suggestion rather than a law. Yuna worked out some of the mathematics. She created equations that might explain how such technology could function, but the equations themselves were disturbing. They required accepting that multiple contradictory things could be true at the same time, that cause and effect were not fixed, that time could flow in any direction. Her hands shook as she wrote the formulas. Dongyun made a breakthrough with the biological data. He identified the quantum organisms. They were cats, common Earth cats, but the humans had discovered something incredible about these animals. Cats existed in a natural state of quantum uncertainty. They were somehow able to be in multiple states until observed. The humans had found a way to harness this property, to use it as a defensive system. The implications were staggering. Human warships had cats aboard, not as pets. As living quantum shields, the cat's natural uncertainty made the ships hard to target. Weapon systems could not lock onto something that was not in a fixed position. Sensors could not track something that existed in multiple places at once. It was defense through fundamental uncertainty. But there was more. Much more. The humans had devices called causality inverters, weapons that fired before the trigger was pulled. The effect happened before the cause. An enemy ship could be destroyed before the human ship even decided to attack it. The timeline of events was reversed. It made normal defensive strategies useless. They found evidence of engines that ran on paradoxes. The more impossible the situation, the more power the engines produced. The humans had turned logical contradictions into fuel. They had made their ships stronger by making them more impossible. It was engineering that laughed at the laws of physics. Minji compiled all their findings into a comprehensive report. It was over 500 pages long, filled with data, analysis, theories, and warnings. She classified it at the highest security level. Only a handful of people in the entire alliance would be allowed to read it. The knowledge was too dangerous to spread widely. She requested a meeting with Admiral Seojin. He was the highest-ranking military officer in their sector. If anyone needed to know about human warship capabilities, it was him. The meeting was scheduled in his private conference room. Maximum security. No records would be kept. Minji brought her entire team to the presentation. They each explained their part of the research. Huno showed the energy weapon analysis. Yuna presented the mathematical framework. Dongyun explained the quantum biological systems. Admiral Seojin listened in silence. His face grew more serious with each revelation. When they finished, Seojin sat quietly for several minutes. He was processing what he had heard. Finally, he spoke. He thanked them for their work, for their bravery in studying something so dangerous. But he agreed with their conclusion. This information must be highly restricted. Very few people could be trusted with it. Seojin made an immediate decision. The report would be sealed in the military archives. Access would require authorization from 3 separate admirals. The research team would be sworn to secrecy. They would never speak of their work again, not even to each other. The project was officially closed, but Seojun also made another decision. He would update the official military doctrine. The standing orders regarding human warships would be strengthened. Made absolutely clear. No scanning under any circumstances. No attempts to study or analyze their technology. No efforts to replicate their systems. Complete avoidance of all curiosity about human military capabilities. The Council of Wise Species had been right all along. Some knowledge was better left unknown. Some mysteries were meant to remain mysteries. Human technology was one of those things. It worked. That was all anyone needed to know. How it worked was irrelevant. Why it worked was dangerous to consider. The fact that it worked was enough. Minji and her team left the Admiral's office. They would never work together again. Their research would be buried forever. But they had learned something important. They had confirmed what the Varathi had discovered. Human warships operated on principles that mortal minds were not meant to understand. The humans themselves probably did not fully understand it either. They just accepted it and moved forward. Maybe that was the real lesson. Sometimes you had to accept the impossible without demanding explanations. Commander Jian stood in the docking bay of the human vessel Horizon's Edge. She was waiting for her alien guests to arrive. The bay was clean and well-maintained. Standard military specifications. Nothing unusual to the casual observer. But Jian knew better. She knew what lay behind the walls. What powered the systems. What made this ship function in ways that should be impossible. Behind her stood engineer Wu Jin and biologist Nari. They had been specially selected for this meeting. Wu Jin understood the ship's systems better than anyone. He could explain the technology in simple terms. Or as simple as impossible technology could be explained. Nari specialized in the biological aspects of the ship. The living systems that made everything work. The alien research team arrived in a small shuttle. They had requested this meeting after their secret study. They wanted answers. They needed to understand. Director Minji led the group. With her were analysts Junho and Yuna, and xenobiologist Donghyun. They looked nervous, scared even, but also determined. Jian greeted them formally. She understood why they were here. She had read the reports about the scanning incidents, about the scientists who went mad, about the warnings spread across the galaxy. She felt a bit guilty. Humans had not meant to cause such problems. They just built their ships the way that worked. The way that made sense to them. They moved to a conference room. It was a normal room. Table, chairs, a display screen on the wall. Nothing threatening. Jian offered them drinks. They accepted. Everyone sat down. The tension in the room was thick. The aliens wanted answers but were afraid of those answers. It was an uncomfortable position. Minji spoke first. She explained what her team had discovered. The quantum signatures, the probability manipulation, the temporal anomalies. She asked directly. How was any of it possible? How did humans build technology that broke every rule of known physics? How did they accept such contradictions? Jian smiled. It was a gentle smile. Not mocking, understanding. She began to explain. Humans had discovered something unusual about Earth's animals. Particularly cats. Somehow cats existed in a natural state of quantum uncertainty. Scientists were not sure why. It just was. Cats seemed to exist in multiple places until someone observed them directly. Donghyun interrupted. He had theorized this, but he needed confirmation. Were there actually cats aboard this warship? Living cats? Used as part of the ship's systems? Nari nodded. She gestured to a wall panel. Would they like to see? The aliens looked at each other, then nodded. They had come this far. They might as well see it all. Nari opened the panel. Inside was a comfortable space, cushions, toys, and 3 cats. One was orange. One was black and white. One was gray and fluffy. They looked completely normal. They were sleeping peacefully. Occasionally, one would twitch or shift position. Just regular cats. Nothing special to the naked eye, but Nari explained. These cats were integrated into the ship's defensive grid. Their quantum uncertainty created a field around the vessel. Enemy targeting systems could not lock on. Weapons had trouble hitting something that was not in a fixed position. The cats did not know they were doing it. They just existed, and their existence protected the ship. Donghyun stared at the sleeping cats. His mind tried to process this. Living beings used as shield generators, not through cruelty or modification, just by existing naturally. It was brilliant, insane, but brilliant. He asked if the cats were harmed. Nari assured him they were not. They were pampered. Well-fed, given the best care. They were the most important crew members on the ship. Woo-jin took over the explanation. He talked about the probability drives. Human quantum mechanics had proven something interesting. The observer effect was real. The act of observing something could change its state. Humans had weaponized this concept. Their drives worked on belief. If the crew believed the ship would reach a destination, quantum mechanics made it more likely. Certainty became reality. Yuna asked how that was possible. How could belief change physics? Woo-jin shrugged. He did not fully understand it either. Nobody did. The math worked. The engines functioned. Ships reached their destinations. That was enough. Humans had learned not to question success too deeply. If it worked, use it. Understanding could come later, or never. Either way was fine. Junho asked about the temporal readings. The scans had shown time moving in multiple directions. How did the humans deal with that? Did it not cause problems with causality? Did effects not happen before causes? Woo-jin admitted that yes, sometimes that happened. The recycling system was a good example. He explained the recycling system. It used temporal loops. Waste was sent backward in time to before it was created. Then it was processed and turned into raw materials. Those materials were used to create new things, which eventually became waste, which was sent back in time. It was a closed loop. Perfectly efficient. Zero waste. But it required accepting that some things happened before other things that caused them. The aliens sat in silence. Their faces showed a mixture of awe and horror. This was everything they had discovered. Everything that should be impossible. And the humans just accepted it, used it, built their entire civilization's military around it. They did not seem disturbed by the contradictions. They just worked with them. Jiyeon understood their confusion. She explained that humans had a different relationship with reality than other species. Throughout their history, they had encountered impossible things, had believed in impossible things, had made impossible things happen through sheer determination. They had learned to embrace impossibility. She talked about human history, how they had survived on a dangerous planet, how they had built civilizations against all odds, how they had reached space despite having weaker bodies than most species, how they had joined the galactic community even though they should have been too primitive. Statistically, humans should not exist, but they did. That was the human way, making the impossible real. So when they discovered quantum mechanics, they did not see contradictions. They saw opportunities. When they found that observation could change reality, they used it. When they learned that time was not fixed, they worked with that. When they discovered their pets had quantum properties, they adapted. Humans did not let reality limit them. They made reality adapt to their needs. Nari added something important. Human children grew up with quantum uncertainty. They learned about it in school. They were taught that reality was flexible, mutable, observer-dependent. By the time they became adults, they accepted it naturally. It was not frightening or confusing. It was just how things worked. Their entire culture was built on embracing the impossible. Minji asked a final question. Did the humans realize how disturbing their technology was to other species? Did they understand that it drove scientists mad? That it challenged the sanity of those who studied it too deeply? Jiyeon nodded slowly. Yes, they knew. They had received the reports. They had heard about the incidents. That was why they were having this meeting. The humans wanted to help. They would provide technical readouts, simplified explanations, safe documentation that other species could study without risk. They would not share the deep theory, not the full mathematics, not the complete principles, just enough information for allies to work with human technology safely, to trust it without needing to understand it fully. Woo-jin pulled up files on the display screen, technical manuals, operating procedures, safety protocols, all written in simple language, with warnings clearly marked. Do not try to replicate this technology. Do not attempt to understand the underlying principles. Just accept that it works. Use it as directed. Ask humans for help if needed. The meeting ended after several hours. The aliens left with data files, safe information they could share with their governments, with their militaries, enough to work alongside human forces without risking their sanity. They also left with a new understanding. Humans were not trying to be mysterious or difficult. They were just being themselves, a species that had learned to thrive in impossibility. As the alien shuttle departed, Jiyeon watched from a window. She smiled. The galaxy was learning to accept humanity, not to understand them. That might never happen, but to accept them, to trust them, to work with them despite not understanding how they did what they did. That was enough. That was progress. And maybe she thought that was the most human thing of all, moving forward without complete understanding, embracing uncertainty, making the impossible routine. Fleet Commander Hajun sat at his desk in the command center of the main Alliance base. Before him were reports from across the sector. Incidents involving human warships. Not conflicts. Not battles. Just encounters that had gone wrong. Ships that had scanned when they should not have. Crews that had tried to study what they should have ignored. Scientists who had pushed too far. The numbers were troubling. 12 separate incidents in the past 6 months. 17 personnel requiring psychological treatment. 3 requiring memory suppression. 1 scientist who had to be permanently removed from active duty. The problem was getting worse, not better. Despite all the warnings, despite all the protocols, people kept making the same mistakes. Hajun made a decision. The current policies were not strong enough. They needed to be reinforced, made absolutely clear, written in language that left no room for interpretation, no exceptions, no special circumstances, complete and total prohibition on scanning human military vessels. The order would go out immediately to every ship, every station, every facility in the Alliance fleet. He called in Science Officer Yunji. She was responsible for updating the official doctrine. For writing the technical manuals and training materials, she entered his office carrying a datapad. She had been expecting this summons. She had seen the reports too. She knew something had to change. Hajun gave her the assignment. Rewrite the entire section on human technology interaction. Make it clear. Make it strong. Include case studies. Include warnings. Include consequences for violations. The new doctrine had to prevent any future incidents. Lives and minds depended on it. Yunji nodded. She understood the importance. She would start immediately. She worked for 2 weeks. She reviewed every incident report. She interviewed survivors. She consulted with psychologists. She spoke with the Human Liaison Office. She gathered as much information as she could. Then she began writing. The new doctrine filled 20 pages. It was detailed, comprehensive, absolutely clear. The key points were simple. First, maintain minimum safe distance from human warships at all times, at least 50,000 kilometers when possible. Never allow close approach without explicit authorization from command. Second, no active scanning under any circumstances, not even basic sensor sweeps, not even passive deep scans, only visual observation with the naked eye or standard cameras. Third, do not attempt to analyze or study human military technology. Do not try to understand how their systems work. Do not theorize about their capabilities. Accept what humans tell you and nothing more. Fourth, if you need information about human technology, ask the humans directly. Use the liaison channels. Do not try to figure it out yourself. Fifth and most important, human technology operates on principles that can compromise mental health. This is not speculation. This is documented fact. The human approach to physics, engineering, and reality itself is fundamentally different from other species. Exposure to detailed knowledge of their systems has proven dangerous. Protection of personnel requires strict adherence to these protocols. Yunji included case studies. The Varathi scientist, Junior Technician Deho, others whose names had been redacted. She described what happened to them, how the knowledge damaged them, how some never recovered. The case studies were graphic. Deliberately so. People needed to understand the real consequences. She also included consequences for violations. Any unauthorized scanning would result in immediate removal from duty. Court-martial for military personnel. Criminal charges for civilians. Mandatory psychological evaluation. Possible memory suppression if deemed necessary. The penalties were severe. They had to be. The safety of the entire fleet was at stake. Hajun reviewed the new doctrine. He approved it without changes. It was exactly what was needed. Strong, clear, unambiguous. He sent it to the communications office for distribution. Within hours, it would reach every vessel in the fleet. Every commander would be required to brief their crews. Every scientist would be required to acknowledge understanding. But doctrine alone was not enough. Hajun arranged a meeting with the Human Diplomatic Corps. He needed to formalize arrangements. create official channels for information sharing, establish procedures that would keep everyone safe while maintaining the alliance relationship. The humans needed to be partners in this solution. Diplomatic liaison Sun Wu was assigned to handle the negotiations. He was experienced with human interactions. He understood their culture, their sense of humor, their casual attitude toward impossible things. He was the perfect person for this delicate task. He scheduled meetings with the human representatives. The humans were surprisingly cooperative. They had been aware of the problems. They had received reports about the incidents. They felt somewhat guilty, even though it was not really their fault. They just built their ships the way that worked. They could not change fundamental aspects of their technology, but they could help manage the information flow. Sun Wu negotiated the terms. The humans would provide technical readouts for any joint operations, simplified versions that were safe to read. They would include operating procedures and compatibility information, enough for allied forces to coordinate effectively, but they would not include deep theory, not the underlying principles, not the full mathematics, just practical information. The humans also agreed to label everything appropriately, clear warnings on all technical documentation, notices about what was safe to read and what was not, recommendations for when to ask questions and when to just follow instructions. They would make it as easy as possible for other species to work with them safely. In return, the Alliance agreed to stop all unauthorized study of human technology. No more secret research projects. No more attempts to reverse engineer human systems. No more curiosity-driven scanning. Complete respect for the boundaries the humans set. It was a fair exchange. Safety for cooperation. The formal treaty was prepared. It took 3 months to finalize all the details. Legal teams from both sides reviewed every clause, made sure everything was clear, that there were no loopholes, no ambiguities. The document was perfect, ready for signatures. The signing ceremony was held at the Alliance headquarters. It was a formal event. Ambassadors from multiple species attended. Media covered the event. It was treated as an important diplomatic achievement, which it was. The treaty would protect countless personnel from mental harm. It would strengthen the Alliance. It would establish clear guidelines for cooperation. Ambassador Jihoon represented the Alliance. He was an elder statesman, respected across the galaxy. He had negotiated dozens of important treaties. He understood the significance of this one. He approached the signing table with dignity. The human ambassador stood on the other side. She was young for her position, but she carried herself with confidence. They signed the treaty together. Multiple copies, one for each government's archives. Cameras captured the moment. It would be remembered as a turning point. The day the galaxy officially acknowledged that some knowledge was too dangerous, that ignorance could be wisdom. That acceptance without understanding was sometimes the best policy. After the ceremony, Jihoon reviewed the technical documentation the humans had provided. The simplified readouts, the safe information. As promised, each document had clear labels. Warning notices at the top of every page. One particular warning caught his attention. It was printed in bold text, impossible to miss. The warning read, "For your mental health, please accept that this works without understanding how. Do not attempt to derive underlying principles from these specifications. Do not try to create your own versions of this technology. Do not theorize about the mathematics involved. Just use as directed and ask questions only through official channels. Your sanity is important to us." Jihoon smiled. It was such a human way to phrase it, casual, almost joking, but deadly serious underneath. They knew their technology was dangerous to other minds. They were trying to protect their allies in the most human way possible. By being honest and direct, by admitting the problem existed and working to prevent harm, the galaxy had learned an important lesson. One that would be taught in schools for generations. One that would be written into the histories. Sometimes the wisest course of action was willful ignorance. Sometimes the smartest decision was to not ask questions. Sometimes accepting mystery was better than demanding answers, especially when it came to humans, especially when it came to their engineering. Their warships operated on principles that mortal minds could not safely process. They ran on impossibilities made routine. They functioned through contradictions made stable. And that was okay. It did not need to be understood. It just needed to be accepted. The new protocols went into effect immediately, across the entire alliance, every ship, every station, every research facility. The message was clear. Do not scan human warships. Do not study their technology. Do not try to understand their systems. Work with them. Trust them. Fight beside them. But do not look too closely at what made them work. And strangely, this made the alliance stronger. The humans respected that others recognized their difference. The other species respected that humans tried to protect them. Everyone worked together better, fought together more effectively. The mystery of human technology became less important than the reality of human friendship.